Ladies and gentlemen, what's going on? And thank you for joining us for another episode of JBosaCoHR. This is our 10th episode, and today we have a guest. I'm going to introduce her. Her name is Maison Leigh. She's been a yoga instructor for 5 years. Maison, how you doing?
Hi, doing great. Thank you.
All right, thanks for coming on the show. I know it's kind of awkward to ask you, hey, can you just talk to us for an hour about what you do? You know, it's not like really a conversation. It's like a stage conversation, but thank you for coming on the show. And Mike, you're back again. I can't get rid of you.
No, never going to happen.
The co-host that will never leave me alone. So today, the reason we have Maison on the show is we want to talk about yoga. And this is going to go in all sorts of different directions, but we want to focus on maybe why you should do yoga, what actually is yoga, why you should do it, and should we convince ourselves to do it more often, or maybe it's something we don't want to look into. So we should have all those answers for you by the end of this podcast, so stay with us. And Maison, I'm going to start with you and a little bit of your background. So you've been a yoga instructor, from what I understand, for 5 years. And what drew you, first of all, to yoga? And then I'll ask you why you decided to become an instructor.
Okay, sure. I think it started pretty much about, we're in 2018, so in 1999. So it was part of some like movement classes and, dance classes that I was sort of taking, and yoga was sort of lightly introduced there. And, people were talking about yoga this and yoga that. And I don't know if Madonna arms existed at the time or not, but that was not of consequence to me. But the city offered a lot of different types of classes to take, and yoga happened to be actually at some of the dance studios that I was sort of, just taking some classes at. So I took a look, and they were actually all really different. So I couldn't actually figure out like what the through line was, but it started back then, and then I was just taking a bunch of classes and throughout time, and then
actually, I'm gonna ask you to pause there real quick, because you were like saying, "Oh, yoga this, yoga that." Were those good yoga things, or were there like intriguing things about yoga? Like what convinced you to do it to start? So you're saying, you knew people that were like, "Oh, yoga this and yoga that." What were they saying? Like what did yoga do that you were like, "Okay, let me give this a shot"?
Well, it's it was a different style of movement, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm very curious about the body and how it moves, coming from a pretty, athletic background. I'm always interested in different, just exploring, whether I'm good at it or whether I'm bad at it, it doesn't really matter. I just kind of like want to experiment. So, yoga was sort of this world that I didn't quite understand. And, I had heard some things that it's like, maybe it's kind of spiritually or religiously tied, which kind of wasn't my draw at all. I was primarily interested in the physical aspect of it, if you will. And so anything that felt a little too, I don't know, like woohoo or woo-woo.
We call it woo. Yeah,
we call it woo. Don't worry. Yep.
Like woo-woo, right? I was like, okay, no. And I couldn't tell based on like class descriptions necessarily if the class was a sort of a right fit. So sometimes I would go in and it was a little bit more woo-woo, like there was, I don't know, or like even like chanting felt that was uncomfortable for me, or all of a sudden people are like, oh, and namasteing. And I just like, there were all these things about that is culturally yoga that weren't being explained to me. And it just, you follow the teacher or the instructor. And I sort of just, you go in and then you just were looking for the one that sort of,
okay, so
best, I guess.
I'll help you out. So your draw was physical. It was like you want your body to move a certain way. You were interested in, since you did a little bit of dance, what can the yoga kind of contribute to that? And then, so you were doing yoga, and then all of a sudden the instructional part. So you must have had like a breakthrough where you're like, man, I want to give this to people. So what was that point in your life?
It was actually fairly early on that I considered it as something that I was interested in. But whenever I saw it taught, or whenever I took these classes, I had these distinct moments. I took one at, I forget, was it Exhale? I think it's called Exhale Spa or something, on like 57th Street at the time. And I remember taking this class with another friend, and I thought, wow, I can't do that. Like, I can't remember all the things that teacher was going, like the sequences, and which I didn't know were called sequences at the time. And I was like, this is way too like over my head. Like, I don't know how to remember all these things. And they use, Sanskrit and all these really long words and all these, things that I didn't understand. There wasn't enough like through line from each class for me to understand how things were organized. And so it wasn't until later that I discovered that there were different styles, and then, I took, there was a class that I took actually in Los Angeles, and that's the one that made me boil it down to, I can do this. And it's because the teacher approached the class in a way that felt very accessible. And there wasn't chanting. She didn't, have us Om or Namaste. And at the end of this class, I thought, wow, if she could teach a class like that, well, I could do that. I can, I don't mean like I could just do it out of my ass, but like, but like if you can teach in that kind of style and this kind of like really much more integrated and accessible way, that's something that appeals to me. And then like a little bit later, I came across I came across a Groupon. Right?
A lot of Grace adventures start with that sentence. I came across a Groupon, and then all of a sudden,
I came across a Groupon.
A lot of adventures happened after that. Yep.
Well, that's how I did the float tank.
Exactly. There you go. Yep.
Came across a Groupon for a teacher training for a certification process.
Just like on a Groupon.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, here's the thing. It's like, the universe conspires to help you kind of like go the direction that you want to go. Yeah. Right. So in my case, I don't know why I was looking at whatever it was, but I looked at it, and it was a certification process. It was in Los Angeles actually at the time. And, but it was it was an anatomy based approach. So to me, like an alignment and anatomy based approach. So it didn't feel like it had like the dogmatic approach of like a certain kind of like hot yoga or like, a different kind of like,
you're gonna have to explain that a little bit.
So it felt like I could approach it from a way that made a lot more like logic and sense for me, without like bringing in all the other, things that had made me initially uncomfortable.
That breaks my heart. Let me tell you, we're gonna have to get into that a little bit, but the rejection of the woo kind of breaks my heart a little bit. And Mike,
no, I mean, it's not an ultimate rejection of the woo. That's just the beginning. So.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Mike, you asked Mason to be on the show. Mm-hmm. So what particularly invited you to? Well, what particularly compelled you to invite her onto the show?
Well, I want a female perspective on a lot of things going on right now, and I think that there's like an obesity epidemic in this country right now, and there's a health epidemic, and there's a lot of things that are just not working with the way that we're doing things right now in this world. And I think yoga is one of those things that it's a no-brainer that most people should be doing yoga.
We're going to have to really open that up.
But you know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's one of those things where if everybody did yoga, and I don't do yoga. I've done 1 or 2 classes like 8 years ago. I don't even do this stuff, but it's one of those things where objectively it's like, wow, all these health problems that people are going through, yoga's a good place to start. Because imagine a society where 80% of the population did yoga. It's way better than people sitting on the couch and eating Funyuns and, you know what I mean? Like popcorn. I mean,
wings.
This is a very practical health application that we can just all do. So, I mean, for people who are just like, I don't do yoga, I'm not that type of person, I'm a manly man. It's like, why would you want to do yoga? I mean, I can ask Mason this. I mean, someone who's just not interested at all, like, I don't do that, whatever stuff. Why yoga?
Yeah, what is it to you, Mason? Like, what is yoga to you, particularly?
Well, here's the thing about why anyone should do anything, right? You can't force anybody. At the end of the day, it's your own choice.
Right?
Like something, right? Something has to, not in America, anywhere. Like something has to propel you and compel you to want to do something. So if it's for the sake of your own health, like either you get like, that life check that is like, oh shit, I need to, do something about this. Otherwise, everyone's lazy. Like they're content. I'm lazy too,
Yeah.
They're content to just sort of sit around and be blobs, and that's their choice, so I can't, force anyone to be like, okay, do some fucking yoga, right?
Well, that's definitely do some fucking yoga. That should be your tagline. But that's an excellent point though, because so many people don't do the right thing because they just don't want to. So just for someone to want to do anything takes the only thing that matters is the individual. They have to want it. So how do you make people want to do something that's as difficult as yoga?
Well, I also think in this society, people are not so compelled to use their bodies. Unless you make it like a hobby, like a dedicated hobby, you don't use your body every day. You can very well wake up, get in a car, go to work, get in a car, come back, and never really actually make yourself out of breath or do something strenuous.
Yeah, that is a weird thing, how so many people go
dangerous.
through their life and they're never out of breath.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating thing to me, you know?
Like, I was excited today, and I was in sort of like the basement at my job, at the studio, and I wanted to go to the third floor and tell the guy. I got to the third floor, I'm like, you know, this happened, and that... Hold on, just give me a second. I ran up here because I was excited, you know? And not that I'm out of shape, but I just ran upstairs, you know, to go tell him something.
Sure.
But, you know, I physically exert myself almost every day doing something, and then I have a workout schedule, and I realized... yoga showed up. I do yogas every Tuesday. And ever since that showed up, I'm like, I need to do this more often. Like, because it was offered at my job for free. And then, you know, my girlfriend at the time, she loved it. And I was like, you know, I got to try this. You know, if we're going to bond, or I'm going to make this effort to try this. And I actually wound up loving the effects of it. And I kind of took it a step further, and I'll tell you, Mason, that I like the woo aspect of it. Like, just like the minor aspects of it, but I did get into that. I mean, you listen to my other podcast, so I can kind of merge those worlds into something I like.
Well, at the same time, though,
I am not against the woo. Like I said, that's the very beginning. You asked about the beginning of this journey.
Yes, the beginning, so, I did.
But that's something we can talk about, though, because some people are turned off by the woo and they don't get to the good stuff. So, I mean, what's the solution there? Where it's just like, oh, whoa, this, I don't want to do yoga.
Yeah.
I mean, how do we fix that?
Pull in just a little bit more.
Here's my big pitch about, or not my big pitch, but this is my main quote unquote selling point about whether it's yoga or physical activity in general. So here's the thing about
physical activity. You should do
it. Well, I also do triathlons, so this is.
Woo, man, we have a mogul here.
That's why I got her on here. See this?
Yeah. Triathlons and yoga, and you know, I'm also an actor, and so those are sort of like my trifecta world. Those are the three things that take up most of my time. So in terms of yoga and like physical activity, so as human beings, right, and as far as we know in our conscious minds right now, unless if you had a different experience, you know, during the whole ayahuasca thing, you could tell us otherwise, Jason. This is the only body that we are given, right?
Yes, I agree with you on that.
You are the steward of that body. You are gifted that body, and you are the one that has to take care of it for the length of your life, for your entire life.
It's your vehicle. Right? That's how you get through life.
Right. No one else is going to take care of your body for you. Right. And you need it to last as long as you can possibly frickin' last. Right. And I mean, I don't know how long, that obviously varies from person to person, but you have to take care of it. You know, like it is your most precious commodity in life is you, your health, your consciousness, your and you know, and health is, you know, the quality of life that you want to lead, right? So like nobody's happy with, like, you know, a bent spine, hips that don't work, and legs that don't like let them be able to walk or stand. How many people in a wheelchair, like in an older age, are you know, genuinely happy? That's a
great choice. Like, that is a great point that you're making, because if you're in a wheelchair, you miss walking around. You know, you wish you could. You know, rolling is fine. Like, I'm not you know, I'm not saying anything bad about people in wheelchairs, but I know they're probably envious of people that can walk. Yeah. And people that are walking are not taking care of themselves. Like, dude, go up a mountain, because I cannot do that, you know?
Well, that's what our bodies are meant to do. We're meant to climb up mountains and hunt animals and grow crops. We're meant to be very physical creatures, but that's been taken away from us for one reason or another, and I think our bodies reject that. That's why there's depression or whatever it is, because I'm just lying on my couch and I'm watching TV and I'm watching football, and like, this doesn't work. I mean, it's not rocket science, you know what I mean?
I'm a big hiker for that reason. I like hiking. It's like a very natural human thing to do, like traverse the planet. And you know, yoga makes you feel better doing that. Like, it's it kind of.
Do you find that yoga makes you better as a triathlete? I mean, is that pretty...
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, so yoga, right? Also putting out there, yoga is not a religion, right? It is not a religion. There are religious people who practice yoga.
Correct.
Okay. Now,
Uh-oh,
we
her
froze for a
Wi-Fi.
second. They'll come back.
Hopefully.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, so she started talking about yoga is not a religion.
Back in the
Yeah, so we lost you for a second.
Hold
Can you
on,
start
Mason.
that?
Okay.
Yeah.
You were talking about yoga is not a religion. Your Wi-Fi kind of blipped out there.
But we can keep going. Go ahead.
All right. So yoga is not a religion. But it is practiced by
religious people
of various religious, backgrounds, right? A lot of people like to associate it with maybe Hindus, right? But Hindus are just very peaceful people, and yoga is a part of their religious practice. But yoga in and of itself is not. So yoga has a physical practice called asana, and then there's the philosophy side of it. So yoga, at the end of the day, is actually it's a lifestyle, right? So you choose to follow certain kinds of philosophies, right? Like there is a branch of yoga called ahimsa, ahimsa.
Thank you very much. You can Google that.
Yeah.
So that it basically, in short terms, it means don't cause harm, right? And so the idea behind it is to cause the least amount of harm possible. And this is something that I really connect to, because in all of human life, we are going to cause harm regardless of what choice we make, right? So when you're up against these different kinds of choices, I really consider which one is going to cause the most amount of damage.
Oh.
And that's the one I don't choose. Right. So sometimes if it's interpersonal, right? So there's me, and maybe my honesty about something I know that it will cause that other person a good deal of grief because I know their personality, and I know that and I know how they might absorb the information and therefore carry it with them. So, I'm up against telling them something, being upfront about something, or me just holding it in and me taking it with me because it won't bother me the way it'll bother them. Does that make sense?
That is interesting. I mean,
it's like a mind-body philosophy.
Yeah. But you have to kind of weigh the short term and the long term with that, though. I mean, sometimes you might have to tell someone something unpleasant on the short term, but in the long term.
Right. I mean, you weigh these. This is all personal.
It's an example, right? You're giving us an example. Uh-oh, the Wi-Fi.
It's okay. She'll come back in 10 seconds, maybe. Is that what's going on here? 10, 9. We'll do a little crossfade there.
Well,
crossfade.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay, folks, sorry about that. We had a little bit of a Wi-Fi blip, but Mason was telling us about the mind-body philosophy. She was also talking about the path of least harm, and that's the philosophy you were giving us. Go ahead, Mason, continue. And why is it?
Hey, we're good.
Okay.
She's back. She's back. There you
go. Just ahimsa being this idea that you really, and the least amount of damage, both to yourself or to those outside of you, the environment. Whatever it may be, we are constantly faced with choices all day long. So it could be do I buy that, that ho-ho or that ding dong,
Man.
And,
yeah, I know.
It's a harmful choice.
I haven't had a ding dong in a long time, but I want one now. That's all I'm going to tell you. Yep.
You try. And so that goes back to your own body, right? So choosing things that don't cause you more harm than necessary. If you can think far enough ahead where these choices could lead to something as you mentioned, things like the obesity epidemic in our country, and and frankly probably around the world in many occasions. So it's just being as kind as possible, right? So these are again lifestyle choices, and it takes practice. You don't just overnight necessarily become the most perfect person on the planet. All of our lives are a journey.
Oh, yeah.
And we all explore different options. You try and experiment with different things to see what's right for you. The thing with yoga is that I can say that it is for everybody. It really is. There is,
I've heard that.
If you're right, if the whole world were on yoga, we would live in, a much more peaceful and, personally happy and more, self-content, lives. But, such is not the case. You have plenty of people who are I'm not flexible enough. And really that kind of flexibility boils down to mental flexibility, right? So it's the physical body and how flexible you are or are not and what you think you are capable of is really irrelevant because the whole, yoga is about a practice. You practice to become better than you were a moment before. And that's both, those, philosophically as well as physically.
Well, let me jump in 1 sec, because that's a really interesting point you just brought up. And I've heard yoga on the Rogan podcast described as a martial art against yourself.
Oh,
is that a way to describe yoga? Would you think?
Martial art against yourself.
Is that valid? I mean, in your opinion, because that was an interesting quote, because it's like the only person you're competing against is your previous self. That's the only opponent in your life. Now, to get more of a masculine aspect on that,
martial art, but yeah, I mean, what you're looking to continuously do is to improve upon yourself from that moment you were just before.
Yeah.
And hopefully, effectively, it'll be cumulatively. At some point, you'll be like, you can look back and be like, a week later, be like, wow, I am better than I was a week ago.
That's why they call it a practice too, because it's like you don't ever finish. You're never like, okay, I'm a yoga master, I'm done.
Yoga. Yeah,
you always practice, so it's always a journey, and that's why they call it a yoga practice.
Here's a strange question for you, because I'm so unfamiliar with yoga. I mean, what are different I don't know if it's the word tests or achievements or whatever it is that you would see in yoga that actually measures how good you are? Is it just flexibility? Is it a pose for a certain amount of time? I mean, how do you judge it?
I think that's really subjective.
See, I was gonna say that, but she did it.
Because there are so many different styles of yoga, and I think I don't think it's fair to project an idea that there are certain like belts that you would reach in yoga.
That's the toxic masculinity talking that I got to do.
Mike wants a black belt in yoga.
I want a black belt in yoga. I got to mess someone up.
My sun salutation is amazing.
It doesn't exist. It just, there are ideas of what what being good at yoga looks like on things like Instagram, because people post them in, they're like, contorted into shapes that, most people cannot, realistically, get to. Maybe they can over time. It's not that it's impossible, but like when you see pictures of, usually fairly young females in really, Gumby positions, it can be, a turnoff.
Can you not pick up my phone and look through my That was a joke. I'm like, don't pick up my phone and look through my Instagram.
Looking at Barbosa's phone. Is that what's happening?
Continue. I didn't want to derail you.
It does intimidate, a huge portion of the population that would very much benefit from yoga. They have yoga in things like prisons. They have yoga in schools, in juvenile, centers. And, there are different studies that show, and I can't quote them right now, but the effects of how that kind of like structure and having a little, something to, a meditation comes into play and for things like that, where it allows the individual to not react so, aggressively or violently. They are able to work on themselves, which is, as we were talking about, it's sort of the marker is yourself.
Can we make a distinction? I apologize, but I understand that there's a difference between flexibility and hypermobility. Like you could be a very hypermobile person. You could put your ankle behind your head, but then there's a flexibility where like your muscles like stretched essentially. So it's more like a subjective thing. Like you might not be able to put your ankle behind your head, but you're flexible with your own body. Like you're relaxed. It's kind of hard to explain, but I know it's a subjective thing where like hypermobility is like ballerina gymnastic type stuff, but being flexible is more subjective to your own goals. Like you might be very tight, but you can stretch yourself out. Is that
here's the
correct?
thing about flexibility too, is that you really, for most people, right, you only really need to be as flexible as you need in order to function in the life that you lead.
Hey, there
you go.
That's a good goal.
So like, for most people, they want to be able to get out of bed. They want to be able to sit down on the toilet and get off the toilet. They want to be able to bend over and tie their shoes. They want to be able to reach for something, in their cabinets. They want to be able to walk around. They want to be able to play with their children or their grandchildren. They want to be able to walk their dog. They want to be able to get in and out of a car. They want to be able to open a door or close the door or open a jar of something.
Which
right?
we take for granted sometimes because a lot of people can't do that. You know what I mean? So it's like
there are
little
people
things,
who cannot, right? Yeah. And so this word flexibility has it unfortunately is intimidatingly promoted in, in the ballerina, gymnastics, hypermobility world, right? But ultimately, like the type of flexibility that people need more so than just the physical side is actually it's mental, because this life in this world it's all about, it's the mind, right? So I do triathlons, right? What is the difference between me and somebody else that hasn't done a triathlon? It's really a choice. I chose.
Yeah, what compelled you to do that? That's
can you talk more about your experience as a triathlete? Because, I mean, people don't know, what is even a triathlete? Let's start from the top. So what do you do exactly? Let's start there.
Sure. I've been doing triathlons for 12 years now. And I've done them sprint, Olympic, and half Ironman distances. So I have not done full Ironman distances just yet, but that's a matter of a time issue.
Can you talk about that more?
With the way the world's going,
exactly?
That's going to be Iron Person soon. I mean.
Hold on, let's not talk about that. All right. Yeah.
It's a brand, actually. It's like Kleenex.
Yeah, there you go. But what does that mean exactly? You're talking about the times for Ironman. Could you just expand on that a bit?
The time for Ironman?
But you just said that you're not doing a full Ironman. What does that mean exactly?
Right, because the training for that requires probably 9 to 12 months, and with a good chunk of that having like double workout days.
Okay.
So like given my schedule, it's hard to do that much training and be able to get the rest of life in.
God, you're so lazy, Mason. Do you know that you're so lazy? Oh my God, I can't even.
Why did you invite her on?
I shouldn't have invited her. It's just so.
But so the distances, right? So sprint distances, they vary. So it's not set. It can be anywhere from about a quarter to a half a mile swim. The bike is maybe 8 to 18 miles, depending on the course.
Oh,
and then
that hurts my legs just hearing that, but go ahead. 18 miles.
A 3.1 mile run, right? A 5K. From Olympic distance, that's when it's set. So Olympic is the official Olympic distance. So it's a 0.9 nautical / 1 mile swim, right? It's a 25 mile bike ride and a 6.2 mile run, or 10K, right? And then a half Ironman is a 1.2 mile swim. It's a 56 mile bike ride, and then a 13.1 mile run. And Ironman distance is exactly double. So it's a 2.4 mile swim, a 112 mile bike ride, and a 26.2 mile run. Yes, all done sequentially, all in the same day.
See, I'm fascinated to listen to this because you said earlier you're kind of fascinated by the body. It's a big deal. Like, this is your vehicle. This is what you're doing in life. So you're compelled to push your body to the limit. Like you want, well, maybe not a limit, but you want to get some achievements in, or maybe you want to just express your own sort of physical prowess. Like I'm not saying you're gloating, but you're kind of proud of yourself. You're proud of your body, and being mobile makes you enjoy it more. Am I getting somewhere?
I think it's I find pleasure in exploring the capacity of my body, right? Because I am able-bodied, right? I have arms and legs that work. So how far can they go? What is their max? I don't know. And so I started at an Olympic distance triathlon. I pushed to half Ironman, and so I have to go to Ironman eventually. But I do push the limits because it is physical, but it's paired with mental.
Oh yeah,
right?
For sure.
So if it's kind of like, if I can do this physically, right, and therefore also like mentally, it kind of trains me and sets me up for anything that life can throw my way, right? Because I chose this challenge. I chose this pain and quote unquote suffering, right? No one forced me to go through any of this. I did it of my own volition. So between like the training and the racing and, and I train in all weather and I train year round, right? In the cold, in the rain, whatever. That's
mental.
That's
a lot of mental willpower. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
And, but that's the difference between winning and losing, right? In the game of life for yourself, because the person sitting on the couch potato the person sitting on the couch being a potato, right? Their mind has told them to just sit on that couch.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. That makes me sad.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to the mind that has said, get out there, see what the world has, see what you can do. Right. And, by being prepared, through all this training, it is absolutely a metaphor for life. It means that I am better able and more equipped to handle any adversity that comes my way. And then, so that's getting through the difficult pain suffering part, right? That's triathlon. And then the yoga comes in and it sort of balances, everything out.
You did it for me. I was going to say, bring this back to yoga now, because for me, one of the biggest benefits I've gotten from yoga is the mental aspect of it. Like when I sit myself into a pose and I have to hold it, like you're talking with yourself, like, hold it, don't give up. You can do this, hold it. Right. And then, when you're doing an Ironman, you're with yourself for a long time.
Yeah.
You have a lot of time to spend with yourself. So I feel like yoga would help that communication. And I want you to verify, does that? Like, is your yoga practice helping tremendously with those aspects of your triathlon self?
Right. Absolutely. Yoga is sort of, it's the through line for everything. It's not just for triathlon. It's also for the acting side too. So like, so back when I was talking about the whole, like, woo-woo stuff, right? No, it's totally fine. Like, to each their own, whatever makes you happy. But what I originally, like the part that I said that I was like not terribly attracted to, not that I'm not spiritual. I do, in theory, believe in a God of some sort, right? But what I realized through my practice of yoga is that I increasingly felt more connected to whatever spiritual thing, I could be connected to, right? So we'll just say God for me, right? And so what I found is that in the practice and doing the physical poses, I naturally found myself more meditative, more, connected to things that are bigger than me, things that are inside of me, things that are, just across humanity. And so it's a safe place to practice things, like, mentally going through difficult. So you're holding a pose, right? And it's seemingly difficult, but you talk yourself through it. You figure out how to get through it. And it's a safe place to do that. No one's, you're not going to be injured from,
that's a good point.
Hopefully not anyways, from that kind of like mental and physical challenge, right?
It seems like yoga would have a very low rate of injury, right? It's very... Is that true?
Actually, it depends, because it depends again on the style and the kind of teacher and the ego of the.
That's what I was just gonna say. It depends on your ego. Like, I'm gonna do this. I am gonna do this. I'm like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to hurt yourself. But if you really want to try and prove yourself something, then your ego gets in the way and you hurt yourself. But
right. And actually, that's an important word that you just said. Prove. Like when you have started using yoga to prove like something about yourself to the outside world, or even to yourself, like that proving it's the connection to the ego that, I think it combats each other.
So I have the exact wrong attitude about yoga is what you're saying.
You should not be showing off your downward dog to the girl next to you.
Yeah, that's just like, that's not the way to go, right? Not at all. Okay, I got it. I'm learning a lot on this podcast, let me tell you. Yeah. But you did remind me of something that's a very well-known Navy SEAL rule, is that most people quit at 40%. And I think that's a really important thing to kind of keep in mind, because some people say, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. Those limitations are all in your mind. I mean, for someone who, I mean, you said you've been doing this 12 years. Is that what you said? Triathlons?
Yeah, I'm about to go into 13.
I mean, that's a long time. Do you remember the time before being a triathlete and getting into it? I mean, was it intimidating to go into first right off the bat, or was it just like a gradual thing, or was it just like immediately you got in the zone and said, I can do this? I mean, can you talk about when you first started?
Yeah, sure. So in 2006, I kind of was like, I need to do a triathlon. And
well, what made you decide
me
that?
too.
I'm curious, yeah.
I was like, I need to do a triathlon. And I was like, well, I can swim, I can, bike, I can run. And these are all individual sports that I think I could sort of handle.
But did you do that before you did the triathlons? Were you a swimmer as a kid, or were you?
I swam a little competitively in high school.
Same here. I'm a swimmer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been doing sports since I was quite young. So, I mean, if you want the full background, yeah, I did start off in gymnastics. I've done some track and field. I've done softball, volleyball, swimming. Yeah,
Gotcha.
Skiing, snowboarding.
So you were never not an athlete, essentially.
For maybe I was
like when you were a toddler. Were you doing like crunches as a toddler? Were you like really into this? I'm just.
I will tell you, my abs are much more ripped when I was a teenager than it is now.
That's for all of us. That's for all of us.
Yeah,
don't you worry.
It kind of happens.
Gymnastics was like the foundation of like I think my personal level of strength, and actually my core, like my inner core, like underneath the layer of stuff is actually pretty good. Actually, I've noticed it's a pretty compared to I think the average person, like I can hold certain positions and stuff in, that I think other people can't. Like
I actually have a layer of like fudge and Milano cookies that I have to deal with. Just a very light layer.
Like burger muffin belly.
Yeah, I call it my cookies.
Yeah.
Like you can kind of tell I work out, but you can kind of tell I can't turn down cookies. Like Like it was like that meme going around.
Totally fine. Yep.
There is no life without a cookie every now and then.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I need cookies. Thank you.
That's your reward for a busy week right there. Give yourself a goddamn cookie, but go ahead. Yeah. But for someone who is literally, someone who's really struggling with physicality, they've never worked out, they're just one of those people. I mean, what would you recommend to someone who just, I want to do this, but I've never been on a sports team, I've never done anything like this.
You mean in terms of triathlon or like yoga?
Really anything, yoga or triathlons, whatever it is.
Like I said, the first thing is being like, I am, the person, the steward of this body, right? I am the one that has to take care of myself. No one else is going to do it for me.
Notice you're driving. You got to notice you're driving, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to take responsibility for yourself first, right? And once you've done that, and then you're like, all right, now what do I do? Right. So, when it comes to taking care of your body, it's not just the physical, it's also, the food that you eat. But like in terms of physical, everyone's at a different place. So whether it's, if you don't walk at all, like if you don't live in New York City, right, which we walk plenty, right?
Yep.
Then start walking, if you need one of those fancy gadgets to help you get there, like Fitbits, you like counting your steps to 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, whatever it may be, you can use all, there are tools available for you. But and everyone's personality is different. So some people need baby steps. Some people want to almost go all the way in. But I will say that having a goal actually is really helpful, right? So maybe like a 5K, right? So 3.1 miles. Well,
go outside. Yes.
Go incomplete. I went outside today. All right. Yep.
You're a different person. I don't know what dimension she comes from, but we got to talk about the person getting off the couch. Where are they going? Yeah.
No, I think if you have, even if you don't have all of your legs, even if you have part of legs, honestly, I think a 5K is extremely reasonable for someone to get to within about 3 weeks. Not 3 weeks. Sorry, 3 months.
3 months.
5K in a different dimension still.
Yeah, I think 3 months. I think anyone could pretty much get to a 5K. If you decide, say today's day 1, right? And I want to do a 5K in 3 months, right? So that's 12 weeks. You can totally do it. So you could start off at like a quarter of a mile, okay? And then every other day or even every week for the first month, just I'm going to bump it up a quarter mile. At the end of a month, you're at 1 mile.
Let me ask you a question.
She's not putting a time in there. Just do it.
Yeah. But I've always struggled with cardio. I've always struggled with the ability just to run in general. And I probably couldn't run a full mile. I'd have to take a couple of breaks or whatever. So that would be my goal, to run 1 mile without stopping. How do I do that exactly? Because do I run over and then take a lot of breaks?
Well, tell me how many minutes can you run right now without stopping? And I don't mean sprinting.
Like a jog you're talking about?
Just run it out.
A jog, a fairly comfortable, you feel like...
It's after a jog. I could
probably jog for about 8 minutes, and then I'd need a break, and I need to slow down and breathe. Do you know how far you've
gone in 8 minutes?
Probably... Well, my math on this is maybe off, because I run once in a while, and I run a mile, 1.8 miles. I've counted in my neighborhood. But I've always just had to take a break, and some days I can do it pretty well, and other days I got to take a lot of breaks. So I'm very inconsistent with anything related to running. You know what I mean?
Well, there are some ways that there are people who approach marathons this way. So they do a couple minutes on and they do a minute off, right?
But what does that mean exactly, on and off though?
So I'm going to explain.
Yeah,
so you could do for a mile, right? We can walk a mile in about 20 minutes. So let's say that your goal is 12 minutes. Okay. So what you could do is something like, I'm going to run for 3 minutes and I'm going to walk for 1 minute. Or if that's too much, I'm going to run for 2 minutes and I'm going to walk for 2 minutes.
I used to do this.
Right?
I've never done this.
And you could break that down into any set of increments that you want. It could be run for 4 minutes and walk for 2 minutes, run for 4 minutes and walk for 1 minute. Right. So, but you stick to it, meaning the math, let's just say it was 3 sets of, 3 and 1, right? So 3 minutes on, 1 minute off, 3 minutes on, 1 minute off, 3 minutes on, 1 minute off. That brings you to 12 minutes, right? Then you can see how far you've come. Like you measure that distance,
So,
right? And then you can adjust from there,
so
right? Make it manageable for yourself.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that. Like I used to do that. And the more you give yourself goals, the more you can defeat those goals and then make new ones. And so I kind of want to bring this back. Let's get, because we're giving you a fitness regimen, but let's bring this back to
for someone as incompetent as me, you know, like they have hope now. You know, that's what I'm going for. Exactly.
Gotcha.
That's really what I'm saying.
You're gonna get off the couch. And you're gonna see the golden sunlight, and you're gonna go.
Because what my goals for the next like 2 months, whatever it is, 3 months, I don't know, especially when it's warmer, maybe, is I want to be able to run 2 miles without stopping. That's my goal.
All right.
And I want to be able to touch my toes.
Calendar it, right? Okay,
Yep.
so calendar it. Look at your calendar, you know, and I mean, for 2 miles, Mike, I really think you should just look for a 5K
Yep.
in the spring. Look for a 5K. And, you know, because if you throw down the money for that 5K, right? And this is, I guess, speaking for me. If I put money down towards something, I'm more likely to do it because I don't want to waste the money that I've just put down because I worked hard for that money, right?
Yeah.
And now I signed up for something. And now, you know, and I signed up.
Oh,
we're just getting
just lost the
it's okay.
signal.
Well, we know where to restart.
All right, yeah. If she puts her money, she's putting her motivation there.
For something.
Yeah.
She'll be back. So start that from. That was excellent, but just start from the top.
You started with your motivation. If you put your money down on something, you don't want to waste it.
Go.
Right. So if I put my money down on something, right, I don't want to waste it. I will do it. You know, in my case, I will do it because money speaks. You know, when you don't put money down, there is like for human beings, like there is the value just isn't there. Like giving things out for free, like it's fine. Some people really appreciate it, but on the whole, like even if it, you know, there are studies also like that show that even if you put down like $1, the value of whatever that was just increases that much for like the human being that is, you know, associating that exchange, right? So you put down the money, you put down that goal, right? And you have to remember you're doing it for yourself, for your future self. Right? For yourself now and for your future, because you want to live as long as you possibly can, right? That is kind of the goal, right? We all want to live long. We all want to live well. You know, we want to be healthy and happy. And, you know, we don't want to be in pain getting there, right?
Like you should do it not to disappoint her.
She's
giving you all this advice.
If I don't run a 5K.
Don't disappoint her this spring.
I think the way it's going to happen is I'm going to just give up cookies, and at the end of the 5K, I get to eat a cookie. I think that's the ultimate motivation right there.
You know what? Honestly, you can set your goal for like that. You know, be like at the end of this 5K, I'm going to have, you know, this cookie. You know, or whatever it is.
That would be me. If you took cookies away from me,
say you're getting angry
I
right
would
now.
do
You're
it.
like, yeah, we're doing this.
No.
You know? You can even put it into your training regimen, whereas like as long as you know you've done everything you're supposed to do for the whole week or every 2 weeks, you get that cookie. You know, you don't have to wait all the way till the end. Again, it depends on the personality. But you know, there was something that. As I'm building, you know, I had told you a little bit, like I'm building this workshop for, you know, triathletes and stuff, and what appeals to triathletes, right? And I think it appeals to a lot of people, right? Is that there's this idea of I want to be my best. I want to do my best, right? This idea of like be the best of who you are, and you know, that kind of like idea. And I think that really appeals to, you know, I think. Humans, right? Nobody wants to be the shittiest version of themselves.
No.
Right? People want to be the best, right?
I think
who they are.
If I may interrupt you, I think that's like a really noble cause that you have to instill in yourself. Like, be your better self. Because when you say you want to be better than someone else, you're using your ego. You're like, I want to be the best runner. I want to beat this guy's time, or I want to. When you just do it for yourself, that's such a more noble cause. I didn't say that with English.
There's no shame in competing against your older self.
No, there isn't. And it's you're improving. Like every time you compete against yourself, you improve. Like, well, that's if you're actually competing and trying to get better than yourself. What were you going to say?
Right. Well, I was going to say, I don't even know. Some people don't like the word competing either.
I don't know. Yeah, there's a better way to say it.
So like even competing against yourself can feel a little bit of like a turnoff. It's just the overall, like, you know, I want to improve, right? I always want to get better, right? And we can always get better from what we were just a moment before. Even if you like royally fucked up, right? If you can recognize, you know, whatever you just fucked up and be like, okay, no, I need to not do that, or I can't do that anymore. And then you just make it better. So even if you you said, I'm going to eat that cookie every 2 weeks and you accidentally ate it every, a week before, you're like, then you're going to be like, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that. But you learn, and it's like, it's discipline, and some people don't like discipline.
This is why we're doing this podcast, because this also relates. This is mental, this is physical, and even social. Mm-hmm. Like you can apply this philosophy to the way you interact with people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah,
yes,
for sure.
Absolutely. It's all yoga, all of it. Like even racing, triathlons, all of that, like it goes back to yoga for me. But like, on the days like that are really hard, sometimes with training, like, again, I'm human and I'm inherently just as lazy as the next person, although plenty of people disagree with me on this one.
I was just going to say that, by the way, but go ahead. Yeah, you're right.
But I have lazy genes too, okay? But when it's really hard for me, or, and it's cold or whatever, and extra blustery or whatever hell it is out there, I think about the end result, right? So in terms of like racing, I love crossing that finish line. That the sense of accomplishment that you feel crossing the finish line of anything. I don't care if it was a mile, if the race was a mile, or if it was, a half Ironman. Like that sense, it feels amazing.
You accomplish something.
Yeah.
Right. That sense of accomplishment. And that is a feeling that I wish more people could feel sometimes, because they get bogged down in jobs and stuff that like they don't like. And then they never feel like, they're never appreciated.
I feel it all the time. It's just I'm playing a video game.
Yeah, exactly.
But so like going on like a training run, for instance, right? This is what I know. I may feel like shit, like right at the beginning, but I know that if I've gone out for that run, even no matter how short it is, even if it's like a 5-minute run, I have never regretted it. I always feel better.
Great point.
That is interesting.
I always feel better for having done something than to not. Like if I didn't do it, I would have been mad, or I felt defeated, or I would have gotten down on myself, right? But even if I go out just for like that mile, or like I have actually a short run in my neighborhood that I do. It's my 3-mile run, and if I feel poopy or whatever, I just go out and do that. And I always feel better at the end of that than if I had never done it to begin with.
Yeah,
I always think about that end result.
That's good stuff right there. Yeah.
I've never regretted it.
That reminds me of a Jocko Willink has a quote about that. He goes, if you're not feeling good, or you just have to go through the motions, just go through the motions. Like just do it. Like doesn't even matter. Even if it's a half-ass workout, you're still doing
you did something.
You're still doing all your workout, right? You just feel bad the entire time.
Right.
Doesn't matter. Just keep doing it. Yeah.
You have to go through life, life is, you have to go through the things that are difficult. So if I can get out there on the worst of days, then I'm going to, on my best of days, can you imagine like what that would feel like? Right. But to be able to get through, the hard things in life, or like, the hard moments, and still be able to do what you need to do, like that's a skill, right? That's discipline. And that gets you, that will set you apart from the rest of, the pods that are just sitting on a couch, right? The fact that you got up and you went and did it, even though you didn't want to.
There's something I want to relate to Jordan Peterson. I heard him quote this. He's like, the world is always trying to get you, or it's always trying to kill you. Like if you don't do anything, it's going to get you. Like you're not going to succeed in this life. No. So it's always not a competition, but it's always a conflict. And so the better you make yourself, the better you do in that conflict. So in this case, we have a triathlete here who you're really far from losing that conflict, if that makes sense. There's a lot you can do to keep yourself alive and keep yourself healthy. And I feel like you're motivating me right now. Like I used to definitely, take care of myself, and it's been a little bit since I've moved here, but I'm like, that's not an excuse, I could have made time, damn it. Like I could have gone at least a mile or something. I like the elliptical because I'm still a little heavy, and I don't want to crash on my ankles and knees, but yeah, I got to do something again.
There's another thing that I do sometimes, especially if I feel really sleepy. And like, I'm like, my eyes are like rolling, shut, and I'm like, oh, good Lord. I've noticed that if I do, I don't know, I'm just going to call it my power planks, right? And I usually try and set the timer for about 4 minutes. And even if I only hit 2 or 3, whatever, it's fine. But set it for whatever amount of time. But usually like concentrating on just like a plank, you don't even have to go anywhere. You just drop to your elbows, or you can drop, just to your hands, do a plank for at least a minute. But ideally for like, if you could do 2 or 3 or even 4, just hold it. just hold that plank, right? and like the amount of energy and the focus that is required of you to have to hold it for longer than you perhaps are comfortable with, right? When you're done, you immediately feel like way better, and I'm like just that much more awake.
I can second you on that, because I used to do this. I used to do club knockout kickboxing,
Okay.
and I hated planks. I hated planks, and the squats weren't so bad, but after doing a lot of squats, I'm like, okay, I'm over this, because I'm not even coming back up anymore. But it was the planks, because you're already on the floor. There's nowhere else really to go.
Yep.
And like you're just shaking, but like after you were done, everything feels better after that plank, especially if you're shaking, like everything, and you have time to talk to yourself again. You're like, oh, hold on,
that core strength is brutal, because like Navy SEALs, I was reading about the training. The water sucks, everything sucks, but they're like, we hated the most butterfly kicks. Oh, we did so many butterfly kicks. It's just like, butterfly kicks? Really? Oh, they're the worst. It's like, you never would think
the
it. The
burpees. The burpees, that's what I was going to say.
The burpees are fine. The butterfly kicks are what gets you, So, yeah.
Probably because of the lower abdominals, that's the area that a lot of people, and that, and then the lower abdominals, that goes towards your hips, and that mobility right there. So again, a lot of people are weak in those areas, and then they fall when they're 80, and then they break their hips, and then they cry about the quality of life.
No.
You don't accidentally work that part of your body, like I was lifting stuff at work, but like that's my arms, that's my back, I'm bringing all this stuff over, but I didn't really have time to do crunches. I'm not like twisting and doing stuff, so you don't accidentally trip over that stuff.
I still got to get rid of that little Milano cookie fudge right there.
I am so motivated. Thank you, Mason. Right now, like I got to go do something tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm gonna do my
tomorrow
squats tomorrow. My planks.
Drop right now.
I'm gonna do some planks. I'll be right back. I'll do.
We got to finish this podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, after the podcast.
But if you want to kind of expand a little bit, I've actually had conversations with people who are very Christian. And they said, I really am uncomfortable doing yoga because
we're circling back here.
Circling back here a little bit. For people who think that it's a threat to being a Christian or to be any kind of ideology, I mean, what do you say to that? Because I've actually had someone who said, like, I would do yoga, but it's too much of a threat to my Christianity. I can't. It's like a little too whatever. Is there anything you can add to that?
I mean, I would like to ask them what they think is threatening. First of all, like,
bam.
What is
you just banned for that. You're like, bam, there we go.
Like, what do you know about yoga, and what is exactly threatening to you?
Yeah.
Well, it's more of like an ideology that may be in conflict with Christianity.
I want to suss out their ignorance first.
Hold on. Let me add
Mike
something
has a
here.
new word for that. We don't say ignorance
So
anymore.
that's a buzzword around here that we
can't
don't
say
use.
ignorant.
We don't use the word ignorant. We use the word unaware.
They are unaware.
Oh, unaware. Okay. I actually mean, I will say that the word ignorance, the way I use it, it just means that you're not educated.
So I would use it the same way, but
I always consider it a buzzword because anytime that word is used, people get
offended. Yeah, we're in an offensive
so.
culture right now. So
okay, well then I'm not looking to offend anybody. So awareness, that's fine.
Awareness.
You are not aware
fancier
as the benefits.
Yes.
We can use words like proprioception.
In fact, you actually owe me $1 because you used the word ignorant. We're actually going to charge you for that. You owe $1. Add it to the jar, the ignorant jar.
You might have offended the audience. So
yeah, exactly. Like $1 right in there. Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, first I would like to, if they're asking me that, or if they're coming at me with that kind of like, that viewpoint, the first thing I want to know is I want to understand what their viewpoint is first, right? I really want to understand where they're coming from so that, as opposed to just, giving them, starting from, my assumption of where they're coming from, right? Because, the breakdown in any kind of relationship is communication, right? Yep. It doesn't matter what kind of relationship. So I need to be able to understand how to communicate with this person first, by understanding where they're coming from. So I'm usually all open ears first. Then secondly, actually, and I don't know if Mike, I touched upon this with you before, but there's a book, The Autobiography of a Yogi. It's Yogananda, and he is Paramahansa Yogananda, or the other way around. I always get them switched. Yep. He's accredited with being the person who brought yoga to the West, right? And he is he was an enlightened man who had an extra set of sort of like just gifts for being spiritual, if you will. And he wrote this book, and in this book he talks about his guru, right? His own guru back in India, and he actually uses scholarship from the Bible to support yogic philosophies, right? And I wasn't preparing for this podcast to have any specific, agenda or anything.
Fine.
So I don't have the page numbers or the
send us in the right direction. Just go ahead and send us in the right direction.
Basically, he talks about, there's one section where he talks about reincarnation, right? So if you are a Christian, reincarnation is actually something that's really hard for people to sort of, I think, put their hands on. It's something that might be Buddhist. It might be something, of a different religion, but not Christian, right? Because they don't believe in reincarnation. They believe that you die and you either go be in the kingdom of God or you
go to
hell,
two places. Right? That's it. You better make it count.
One or the other. But Paramahansa Yogananda, he actually brings in, and it's his theory, right? But he supports it again with scholarship, right? So he basically talks about Jesus being the final version of himself, right? And that's the one that basically ascends into, if you will, like nirvana, into his final. He's, that version of Jesus that we get is actually the final reincarnation of himself, and that there are earlier versions of him that are not exposed, but revealed in earlier parts of the Bible, right? That it's Jesus and his guru. And he mentions, I think 2 instances where he believes that it's actually Jesus and his guru appearing in the Bible before getting to, appearing as Jesus, if you will.
So are you saying that in the time that we don't know where Jesus was for those years, he was doing yoga? Is that what you're saying?
I don't want to make this a religious thing. I don't want to get there, but man, did I just come up with kind of I just stumbled upon this on the internet, but apparently we're going to sidetrack this just for a moment.
Right.
Just for a moment. But they have records, the Buddhist temples, they have records over in Tibet, like that he arrived, like his name is in records out there. Like he traveled all the way out there and then came all the way back.
This should totally be in the Passion Part 2 with Mel Gibson. Dude, he does yoga. All right, let's just go there.
It's like you have a Jew that goes to Tibet to study with Buddhists and makes Christianity. Like, what?
That's some movie shit right there.
I know, right, but I just wanted to put that together because I was like mind blown for just a moment. I was like, wow, really?
Jesus has some missing time. They don't talk about him for like 15 years. He was probably in Tibet doing some yoga, getting crazy.
Let's not sidetrack the conversation. But
well, again, it's not about being religious, but you asked me a question, in terms of like Christianity and, or if a Christian approached, me or anyone in terms of like, yoga and being a religion, it's not a religion.
No.
It's a lifestyle, right? Like,
I want to jump in on this real quick. Before you keep going, I got to tell you the experience I had the other day with this, right? So we had at my job, they had a leadership conference, it was Forging Your Own Path, it was called. And in Forging Your Own Path, it was sponsored by the Women Leadership group at our job. So we thought it was like, okay, the guys are going to have to hold off on this. Let the ladies, and we thought it was going to be one of those, like, it was more targeted how women will deal in the workspace with men. But it was very generic. It was general. Like, it was sponsored by the Women's Leadership Group, which was the thing that we didn't get. Anyway, what I'm getting at is at the very end, the woman that was teaching, where her name was Cara Stelfox, I believe. And at the very end of it, she got very, I want to say, like meditative or like internal. But it was all masked to be acceptable by a Western audience. And I was I'm sitting there, I'm studying Eastern, spirituality now. And I'm like, she's coming from somewhere that this is just like colored differently, like this is more acceptable to everybody in the room, especially with Western and Christian influence. Like, you can totally accept what she's saying, but I'm like, this is very internal. This is very like Buddhist, meditative, even yogic, if that's is that the right adjective there, yogic? Or did I make that up?
You can say yogic.
But it was, and then I approached her afterwards, and I'm like, I asked her for her personal opinion. I'm like, is this tied to you personally? And she said, well, actually, it's part of the curriculum. And I'm like, oh, so it's thought out like to be a mask. But then she said, she admitted to me, it is a personal tie to her. And that's why she teaches that. So I'm like, man, that's cool. Like, the Eastern influence has to be masked and repackaged so Westerners can consume it and not be alienated to what they're doing. And then that's what you're getting at, Mason, is that there's got to be a better way to package it. And I think that's what you do. When we started this podcast, you were saying, let's stay away from the woo, but this is really good. This is just good for you. Like doing yoga is just good. There's benefits.
Yeah.
You're not going to do anything bad for yourself if you do yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are no like bad side effects from practicing yoga. Right. And that's aside from like practicing poorly in the sense that you make poor decisions for yourself about a physical practice and pushing yourself to a point,
Oh no.
We lost you again.
Well, while she's stuck, I'm
that aside.
There she's back. Hold on. And
there she is. Okay.
Go.
I stopped talking on the, but yeah, I mean, there's only good to be reaped from practicing yoga, even if it's just the philosophical side. You don't even have to do the physical side. But they are, intertwined. I think you will notice that, like, even if you go walking, right, and you just start looking at the trees and you start thinking about birds and you start noticing certain things, that is also a yoga practice, right? Because
it's a philosophy,
what you're practicing is you're, becoming, being more aware of where you are, what is surrounding you, as opposed to being, it's all about you and like some small little center, self-centered world, right?
So, I want to add a point to this, and I always bring up cell phones as a way, like to eliminate diversity, right? But I feel like yoga and fitness and what it does for your mind, body, and spirit is almost like the smartphone of fitness, because everybody wound up getting a smartphone because it's, well, not everybody, but it's the overwhelming majority. Everybody uses a smartphone because it's efficient. You have your contacts, you have your websites, you can do everything. So a smartphone is a great tool to stay connected. And I feel like now that I've done yoga is like that fitness for, and also your mind and body and spirit, but it's everything. It's a really just efficient way to take care of yourself. So if you start a yoga practice, and it's hard to convince people, especially now I said, like in the Western area, the yoga's all over the place, but still there's a lot of people that just sit on the couch and be like, no, I can't do that. Or like, no, that's not for me. I'm not gonna do it.
But they're going to stay that way unless they want it.
Right, but that's exactly why they need to do this. It's that mind, right?
Yeah.
It's their mind telling them that they can't, or it's not for them, or whatever it is, and that's their.
Yeah, it's just like this. No, while she's blipping out, it's just the same way of saying, like, "Oh no, I can't use a smartphone." Like that's it's you're already giving up before you even try it.
First hurdle. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you heard his point just now, right? I got you.
Guys, yeah.
Okay.
But just to add some knuckle drag into here, they're like UFC. I always make this this analogy or comparison, whatever. I mean, mixed martial arts. You mix a bunch of different martial arts and you create mixed martial arts. So like yoga could be an aspect of someone's philosophy to be more healthy. Also your diet choices, running, who knows? But you mix everything together, and that's kind of what the 21st century is all about. You take 100 different philosophies and you channel it down to what works for you. Some people just physically can't do certain things because they just have physical limitations. But if they have a little bit of something that makes them healthier, and they take a little bit of something else that makes them healthier, the ultimate goal here is health and wellness. Whatever road leads you to the top of that mountain, it doesn't matter.
But you might as well give yoga a shot because it's everything.
Yeah.
And I almost wish, I've always done something athletic in my life, and I wish that around my college years, I was more inclined to do yoga because that could have been my fitness thing. Like I would have been really happy if yoga was my fitness thing, and I kept doing it. I could have had a bunch of years already under my belt doing it.
Sure.
But I just felt like, man, I've been missing out my whole life. I should have been, but I don't know where I got to my point where I'm like, I'm going to go do that yoga class. Like it took too long for me to get there. Like the influence wasn't there. And I hope people listening now will be like, okay, maybe I should just give this a shot.
Well, that is why I started jogging a few years back, because I was looking at the benefits, and it was like, the only negatives was like shin splints and maybe overtraining. But aside from that, it was universally like physical jogging or whatever is universally known as being health and wellness and everything just beneficial. So why wouldn't you do something that is 99% positive and the 1% is, whatever. It's just, you get at the door, you might deal with the 1% that might go bad. You know what I mean? But yeah.
So we're going to start winding this down. I want to go over two things. I want to go over the yoga / meditation crossover, because that's near and dear to me, because I learned what meditation was after thinking it was bullshit for so long. Like, what are you doing? You're just meditating and thinking to yourself. And I realized, well, actually, this is pretty good for you if you learn how to do it. Like, if you're totally alienated and you don't know what it is, you're going to have problems thinking what meditation is, and you'll think it's bullshit. It's
let me drop out one point on that, and I mentioned him a lot on this podcast. Clint Eastwood is an example of someone who's universally known as a healthy person because he's 88 years old and he's still working. He's going to be starring in a feature film as a lead the next year, the Mule, I think it's called. But Clint Eastwood is the manliest dude ever. He does meditation, and that's part of the reason why he's still 88 years old and still rocking and rolling.
So we're going to go over that,
Go ahead.
and then we're going to close at Mason. She's got our website, which is Death and Yoga, deathandyoga.com. I should put the .com in there. And she's got her style of yoga and motivation and athleticism on there. Like we've heard her talk for an hour, and I'm motivated to go do stuff. So
I'm gonna actually run home. I'm not gonna drive home. I'll just come back for my car tomorrow. You're good.
I'll see you in a week, Mike.
Yeah, it's okay. It'll take a while.
So let's do the meditation crossover here. So you're a yogi. Well, you practice yoga, and have you experienced or experimented with the realm of meditation and yoga, Mason?
Okay, so like I said in the beginning, right, I was like turned off by, or not terribly attracted to, certain parts of this. And, so that, I've been practicing yoga, I guess, we're talking, 19, almost 20 years perhaps at this point, right? I only became certified 5 years ago, or in 2013, but, as a practicing.
You're like 22, person. 23. How you been doing that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's boring.
Yeah, you were in elementary school doing all this. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. We're just going to leave it like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I discovered is that through this practice of yoga, as I've, gone on to practice more and more, and as I became certified, and as I've been, getting more education in terms of what else is out there, what I realized is actually the practice of yoga is inherently meditative, right? So they're not separate, actually. So once you actually start practicing yoga and the philosophies, the physical, etc., the meditation is actually it's actually already in there, right? So meditation to me is really, it's just about your ability to focus on something, right? So when they're like, people think, oh, meditation, like you're supposed to get rid of everything in your mind, and maybe, for some people, maybe that is. But for me, it's actually kind of sort of the opposite. Can you focus on just one thing? Can you focus just on the tip of your nose, right? Can you focus on where that is? Can you see it? Can you cross your eyes and see the tip of your nose? Do you know what it feels like? Do you know what it looks like? There are all these questions that you could think about, shape, size, texture, whatever, about the end of your nose. And can you just concentrate on that one part of your body for 15 minutes?
So that's one thing. That's one thing I got down. The schnozola I can focus on pretty easily. But go ahead. Yeah, that's easy peasy. I got this. Don't you worry. All right, go ahead.
It's sort of like the ability to sort of cut away, I think, the unnecessary chatter in your mind, and just to kind of zero in. And if that's thinking about nothing, if that's the way you can get to it, fine. But if it's thinking about just concentrating on one thing, right? It could also be the thing that brings you the most amount of joy, right? So you think about something that it's not just a little smirky smile joy, but something that really just makes you exuberantly dogs, when they, they see their owner come home and they're like,
they do it right every time. Dog
right?
will greet you at the door every time the right way.
Every time, happiest little thing on this planet. That kind of just that kind of joy. You could just sit there and you can meditate on just that thing or that person or the dog that makes you feel that way. I'm
going to think about corgis the entire time I'm meditating. Corgis.
Cookie. That's fine.
Corgis and cookies. There we go.
Oh my goodness.
And cookies. Okay, there you go.
New podcast.
So there are lots of different.
No. All right, we got another Wi-Fi blip
styles.
here.
Go
ahead.
You're back. I was talking about transcendental meditation. One world. Meditation. There are lots of different kinds of styles out there. Again, and you can just pick the one that works for you. Or it's just sometimes it's just sitting and just. Can you be quiet for 5 minutes? Can you be quiet for 10 minutes? Can you let go of the phone? Can you let go of the computer? Yep. Can you find a way to just let go of all the things that distract you and just be I am, I'll be I'll use simple things I am here. I am here. And I just keep repeating it until it clicks, I'm here. I'm here. I am here, 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 here. here's where I am.
See, I don't think
So-
people that haven't like learned how to meditate are going to understand what you're doing, Mason. Essentially, it's almost like it's a mantra, and a mantra is something that you repeat over and over until you understand it, or you're in that moment more and more. Like you get more immersed. But just from my experience, okay, like I didn't meditate my whole life, and then when I learned how to meditate, I'm like, are you serious? Because I've been doing this my whole life. You know, people have told me my patience is a virtue. And now my mental fortitude to do a task and not be bothered by people it's incredible. And I'm just learning. And
Right.
the yoga, when I started doing yoga, like when I told you get time to communicate to yourself, like you're in a pose and you're like, do it, don't give up, do it. Like you have this internal communication, which kind of turns into meditative. So instead of thinking about the pain, thinking about giving up, you start ignoring it. And you start ignoring the strain on your body. You let your body communicate to you, and then you can kind of dismiss, like, you can get through it, but you're letting it get to you mentally. Like, oh, my thigh's killing me. Like, when I'm in my warrior one, I'm like, oh, I want to get out of this. And then you can choose to ignore that because you're capable of doing it. You're not going to fall over. So I start just kind of being with myself. And I think that's one of the massive benefits of yoga is the way you can start thinking, and you can bring the thinking or the way you are with yourself from yoga into the world with you. Like when you go to your job and you're bothered by something, it's just like you convince yourself in that yoga pose, like, I can do this. Why should I get mad about this? Like, or why should I feel like I'm strained? I'm going to do it anyway. And so like that, the fortitude that I've gotten from it, and I've just started is incredible. And I got to give props to my yoga instructor, Michelle. She's the yoga instructor, and she's also the meditative coach at our job. Like, shout out to the job, because the job's awesome. Good. And I've just learned, even it's just this little bit, and this is for the users, not the users, the viewers that are watching this. Just the path, the beginning of this journey has improved how I think and how I feel about myself so much. And there's still so much more to learn that I can't stress enough. Like, do it. Give it a shot, guys. Try the yoga first. And then if you like the yoga and you're comfortable sitting with yourself, like, you'll start feeling your problems. You're like, oh, yeah, I should probably start working on my tummy, or, oh, that shoulder, I got to roll that out probably every day more. Once you start, like, that's like internal communication. Once you start communicating with yourself more often, then sit and try a meditation session, whether you look up something on YouTube or whatever the case may be. But I cannot recommend it enough. I wish I would do it more, but I like video games a lot. So instead of 15 minutes, I feel like I meditate on my own enough, like I'm in the car. I could just my body gets to work and I have no idea how I got there, like it's kind of creepy. Yep. But
you know what? Sit in child's pose for like 2 minutes before you start your video games.
Yeah.
Life hack. There we go.
I'll do it. I mean, it's good to stretch your back. Like when I was living with my girlfriend at the time, she would do that in the mornings, and like she'd have a much better day just because she was stretching herself out. And you're like communicating with yourself, like, oh yeah, I could probably work on that with my body and stuff like that. So
you don't have to do like a whole hour of it.
No, you don't.
Sometimes you just have a couple of minutes, and then that's your practice for the day. It's a practice, right? So you do what you can, and when you can do a little bit more, you do a little bit more, but we all have lives, and we all have crazy lives, and they're busy, and, but if you have a couple of things that like go-to poses or go-to stretches or whatever that you can do for just a couple of minutes, like, especially if you're in a harried, like scenario and life is getting away from you, be selfish, take 5 minutes for yourself. I think almost anyone could take 5 minutes somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, you could just be like, I'm going to take a bathroom break for 5 minutes, and then just go. You can just even sit on the toilet and just be like, and sit there for 5 minutes for yourself.
Just in lotus position on the toilet.
Lotus.
More meditation.
I'm just kidding.
For you it is like when you have that cup of coffee. Like, people do this with their coffee, right? They're making their coffee and it's coming out of the Keurig, whatever the case may be. But when you go for that sip, there's something about that sip of coffee. People close their eyes and are like. Like, that's like a meditative moment,
That's me with cookies. I'm telling you, Milano cookies is my ritual, man. I'm just like, take that breath, it's good to go, and then I just force them down. I just shove them down my face because I'm a terrible person. But yeah, yep.
So we're ready to move on. We're gonna start talking about death and yoga.
Sure.
Let's
How
talk
much
about
time
death
do we
and
have,
yoga.
by the way? We're
I
rocking and
kind
rolling
of
right now.
lost the timer, so I hope that this podcast has been very beneficial for everyone listening so far. Because if you're getting to this part, thank you, and let's move on to some death and yoga. And
I think we can wrap with the death and yoga part because I want to have you back a couple of times.
yeah,
This is
you have
know.
so much. You know, you should listen to London Real with Brian Rose. He's a triathlete that does a podcast, and he does very enlightening podcasts. He's one of my favorites. I subscribe to him. That's how much I like him.
Oh.
Yep.
And yeah, you should. His intro actually is his journey to do that triathlon, and then they did a documentary when he finally did his Ironman. So
Cool.
I'll give you that link after this.
Please.
Let's go to death and yoga. So what
Sure.
inspired you to do death and yoga, and what
Death
can we
and
find
yoga.
there?
Well, I feel like, you know, if people ask you what's your website or what's your yoga thing, you know, death and yoga. And then I think it's immediately like people like death and yoga. It's already a conversation starter, which is, you know, in terms of marketing, it's a
Heavy
good thing,
metal yoga.
right?
Yeah.
Death metal.
And, you know, and just for those listening, you know, the death and yoga, the site does, you know, it's not 100% a go yet, but, you know, for, you know,
You have
In the
name.
future, in the
I mean, you
future,
have the name, that's
for
all
our
that
future
matters, really.
selves, it will be.
it's a work in progress, just like me. It's all good, right?
Exactly.
It's a practice.
So, so anyways, so death, right? Death is this thing that a lot of Americans, especially, I think, do not like to talk about, right? Everyone is afraid of death. It's this sort of like taboo subject. And therefore, I think because we don't talk about it, I think it instills a lot of fear, right?
Oh, yeah.
About it happening. About it happening to others that we love, when we all know that it is, you know, it is an inevitable thing, right? So,
It is an inevitable thing. You're gonna have to rewind, Mason, when you come back.
Okay.
Talk about death being an inevitable thing.
Death is inevitable thing, right? So I want to look at death as I'm encouraging people to consider death as a respectful boundary, a respectful limit, right? So we can only do so much in our lives as we have the time for it, right? So deadlines in jobs, right, often get you to produce shit, right? Like you're like, I need to get this stuff done because my salary and my place of employment and whatever is contingent upon me getting this stuff done.
I think I get where you're going, but continue.
So exactly. Right. So death being this, you know, but most people often feel like, I'm not going to die tomorrow. Right. Or I'm not going to die next week. I'm not going to die next month. They know it's going to happen at some point, but not necessarily in the near future. Right. Mm-hmm. So if you fast forward to your deathbed, right? Like you're going to be gone, you're going to expire. And then I know it's a little morbid. Like you're going to expire in about the next, the next couple of minutes. Right. Mm-hmm. And you sit there, and what do people do? Right. People are going to sit there. They're thinking about their entire lives, and they may think about the things that they regret. They may think about the things that they have, that bring them joy and bring them love, their family members and friends, and the things that they have gone through. But, the way I make a lot of decisions in my life is I consider that last moment of my life. And I don't want to sit there and ever think that, I should have done something. I don't want to regret. And I know that's also I don't know, people talk cliche maybe on some level.
It's not a
too.
cliche. You should live by that.
Sure.
We should. And even people know that we should live like no one's watching and, dancing and all, whatever that
It's
quote
a
is,
cliche
right?
because it bothers people. Because once you tell them that, they're like, oh, and you make them uncomfortable because they're not. So I wouldn't consider it a cliche. It just makes people uncomfortable.
So I don't like to be afraid of things. I do become afraid of things just like any other human being, but I don't like to let fear stop me from not doing whatever it may be. Right. I've never enjoyed that. I just don't want that to be my excuse, because that's everyone's excuse at the end of the day. Oh, I was too afraid to walk through that door of opportunity or whatever it may be. Right. So I just don't ever want to do that. So when I come face to face with something and I sit there and I'm not making a decision, or I can feel that fear rise in me, I kind of consider well, okay, if you were to die right now, would you regret having done this or not having done this?
Intense.
You know,
Right.
I'm just going to draw that back a little bit so it's easier to digest. But have you ever done something for yourself where you're like, future me is going to appreciate this, right? So I put like a 20 in my coat, and I know I'd go out drinking or enjoying something with my friends, and there's an extra 20 in there. And then your future self goes out and you pull out the 20 and you're like, oh, thank you, past me. And you're like, yeah, future you go, you know, like that's a very micro moment of what she's talking about. Like, do something for yourself in the future. So
I've done that with a tube of chapstick, by the way. Where I'm like, yes, extra.
Thank you, past me.
Buy them. Ask for packs of chapstick. Put them everywhere, so I don't have to. You know, everywhere I go, in every bag, every place I sit.
It's in the car. It's in the
Your
bag.
Your future self thanks you, by the way. So yeah. Yep.
Lip balm.
Lip balm,
important.
the best.
I do not like dry lips.
So I'm glad I was able to like kind of like shrink that down. But yeah, I think that's the concept that you're talking about. You're like,
death next in yoga effectively being life. Right. So I'm juxtaposing the two, right? This idea that there is this finite boundary, but that there is a way to, increase the quality of your life. Right. And if you choose to respect that boundary, right, that quote, as far as we know, again, that final limitation, right, make the decisions that lead you to live the fullest and best life that you want for yourself. Right. Whatever that may be. Right. Yeah. So, and again, as you know, yoga is a lifestyle for me too. Right. And a lot of it is actually mental, like it's the mental yoga part. Cause that's
making the decision.
Yeah.
Part.
Keep going. You're good.
And so, so I just, so that's sort of like where I kind of like came up, those words just were drawn to me, like death and yoga, and this idea of not having a life of having any regrets. I don't want fear to keep me from, experiencing something or exploring something, something or someone or, whatever it may be. I don't want to live like that. And so I just think about, my own death, and that I want to make sure that I have literally done everything I could possibly do to experience as much of humanity as I possibly can.
Wow.
Yeah,
period.
Good. I mean, it's such a scary topic to talk about, but I mean, it's a healthy way to turn a negative into a positive.
Like I'm squirming right now listening to all that motivation, but I'm sure there's people listening that are like, oh, I'm not doing anything,
Well, it reminds me of the Woody Allen quote where he says, I'm not afraid of death. I just don't want to be there when it happens. So it's like the Woody Allen mentality, though. He's kind of a nervous wreck all the time. Yeah. So like always a nervous wreck. Yoga. Because maybe Woody Allen should do some yoga and cheer him up a little bit, you know what I mean? But like it's a common thing for people just to embrace that positive spin, because people don't do that. They either don't think about it or they have the negative view of like, eternal nothingness of dying, and it's a good spin, you know what I mean?
I'm just going to point out that the acronym for death in yoga is DAY.
Oh, hey now.
Just being cute, that's all. Okay.
Well played, lady. Well played. All right, yeah. Yep.
So I think we want to wrap this up because we went over a lot.
I think we should, because I want to process and then come back to this in a few weeks whenever you're available, and we can do this again.
Yeah. So we talked about starting with yoga. Then we got into a lot of motivation for your body and fitness and that type of journey. Brought it back to some yoga. Went over some meditation, and we talked about death in yoga, which it's very compelling because it seems like the yoga that you're doing, like, with death and yoga, like you're essentially treating yourself like that future self of you on your deathbed. You're like, fuck yeah, I did yoga and I felt good about my life while I was doing it. Like that feels like a good moment. Like you're not going to regret that. You're not going to regret doing yoga. And I feel like you really brought that home.
Yep.
Right. I will say though, the death and yoga is a platform for me. So I'm offering workshops that are addressing specific areas of humanity that I think, or demographics that I think have a need. So it's not just like a blanket, like studio, like type of class. Like I'm really looking to zero in on, certain kinds of things. So like one being like a grief-based class, right? So just saying that's also something in terms of, my teaching style, as well as the kind of workshops that I want to offer. It's not just like, vinyasa, for instance.
This is not the first podcast you're going to be on, for sure.
Yeah.
We're going to have you back. There's so much to talk about here.
Great. Happy Happy to do so.
You're going to tell us about your adventures and when those workshops happen and who you're drawing to those workshops.
Well, they better happen now, right? I've talked about it.
Yes.
Well, I have to do my 5K.
They're happening, actually.
My 5K I have to do now,
Yeah.
apparently.
Mike,
so,
you already did your 5K. We went to her workshop and I went swimming again. And
All past.
yeah.
I'll keep getting updates. You know,
Yeah.
we're good. Yep. All right, I think that's a good place to call it.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
Yep.
All right, Maison Leigh, everybody. She's at deathandyoga.com. I almost said death and taxes because I'm so used to hearing that from some of the stuff I'm doing.
Different website. That's a totally different website. Yep.
Before we leave, how do you feel leaving? How do you feel leaving now? How are you going to integrate everything that we just heard?
Well, I have to change my life completely at this point. I mean,
like no regrets, man. That's like a long way to say no regrets, but put yoga in there.
My future self was a little pissed off because it's like, Jesus, I got to run and stretch now. Like, oh God,
Mike,
okay, fine.
It took so long to get to that moment. Jesus.
Yeah, got to make some adjustments, people.
Talking to your future self, like we actually just did that right now. Like we're gonna remember this and be like, yeah, we did a bunch of stuff different.
If you can say something to your future self right now, what would it be?
Oh. There was so much.
We'll wrap on that. And
watch
Mason,
this podcast again.
If you want to tell something to your future self, you can do that as well.
Yeah. What would you say? I mean,
me?
Yeah.
Anyone, doesn't matter. You or Jason.
No, I want to hear what Mason is saying to her future, because she's had a lot to say.
Yeah.
But what does that internally sound like to you?
Yeah.
To my future self.
Yeah, I wasn't ready either.
I know, that's why I'm saying it. That's why I'm asking it, because you guys got to think that.
We're gonna end it after this. Like
this is how we end it.
So like in the moment of things that like there are things I do to prepare myself for my future, but like my future self is like I guess I hope you look back and you can see how far you've come.
All right,
Jason, future self message.
I'm gonna say I need to use definitely a lot more willpower when I choose the cookies I eat.
Yeah.
If I can do less, I can still enjoy cookies, but I gotta enjoy way less cookies. I think my future self will appreciate that because I'll be appreciating my body more.
And I'm just say that my future self was like, well, what were the alternatives, dude? Like, you're right. Okay, so get your shit together. That's all I'm going to tell you.
All right. I think we're going to end with that. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to the podcast. Again, Maison Leigh, deathandyoga.com. And we will see you hopefully for a couple more podcasts or podcast forever. Your future self is telling you, listen to this podcast. It's going to be good for you. Good night, everybody, or goodbye.
All right.
Whenever you
Thanks, Mason.
Bye. Yep. Thank you.
Bye-bye.